Dave and I and Michael lived in the house that we had fixed up, and it was a beautiful home that we cherished greatly. It really felt like this was the beginning of the most wonderful life together. Life was going as I thought it was going to go, and I felt so confident that this was going to be how life would unfold. Everything that I knew to be true in my life was false. And I remember all of a sudden that little idea that my therapist had put in the way back of my brain, which struck me. Now, it was like a red flare. I flung open the door and I ran, infuriated, to where he was. And I remember just pounding and pounding on him. Unforgiveness is like a poisonous rattlesnake that lives inside of you. But what did happen was, like a poisonous adder living inside of me, that poison of unforgiveness corroded who God wanted me to be. And this began a very sad, dark time in my life. I was born and raised on Long Island in New York State. I was the youngest of 3 daughters by a lot. My sisters were 10 and 8 years older than I was, respectively, and so I grew up very much like an only child, and it was a beautiful and idyllic lifestyle, living on Long Island with great parents. I grew up in the church. My mom was a catechist as a Catholic, and I was born and raised in the faith. I made, of course, all my sacraments and whatnot. But one of the things that I didn't really do was develop a heart on fire for God. I went to church, but I didn't have that relationship that has become so important in my life. I wound up going to the college of my dreams, Georgetown University, a Catholic university. And it was there that I made some wonderful friends, and it was there that I met a young man who would go on to become my husband. Dave was a year older than I, so he graduated first and went back to New Jersey, where his family home was. And I completed my senior year at school, and we were very much in love and knew that this was really it for us. It was filled with great promise. It was filled with great hope. It was filled with great beauty and a lot of love. And this would be the person with whom I'd spend it. Our wedding day was idyllic and beautiful and filled with love from our family, from our friends, toward each other. It really felt like this was the beginning of the most wonderful life together that he and I would have. And I felt so confident that this was going to be how life would unfold. We left church that day, and I had every expectation that this would be the rest of my life. I soon became pregnant with our child, my first child, Michael. Dave and I and Michael lived in the house that we had fixed up, and it was a beautiful home that we cherished greatly. And I was just at the beginning of my musical career, and I was very blessed that I was able to stay home with my child. And I was still busy as much as I could trying to learn how to be a better performer and a singer and spend the days home with my son. Life was going as I thought it was going to go. Promises fulfilled, expectations lived up to. Things were going great. Dave is a spectacular salesperson and a great worker. He has a tremendous work ethic. And so, as he rose in the ranks at his work, he was being called more and more to travel. And so he began traveling an awful lot, setting up offices here, setting up offices there, becoming the head of North America in his sales. And it left Mike and me home a lot by ourselves when Michael was just an infant. And here I was being upset or angry or feeling neglected. And really, he was working, to support our lives. But I couldn't get over that guilt because that's not what I wanted, and I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy because I just wanted a husband there. I don't want stuff, I just want him home. Because as time went on, and the more that he became involved with work and the higher up in the ranks that he rose, the less Mike and I would see of him. And it finally got to a point where he would come home on a Friday late in the evening, and he would leave on a Sunday morning. And I wouldn't see him the rest of the week. And I felt terribly about it. I felt angry. And things didn't get better. I just felt like when I did see him, he was aloof. He loved the baby. But with me, he was very measured, very cautious, almost angry at me, and I couldn't understand. You've been gone the whole week. What have I done? And then it was the morning of my birthday. I remember that he handed me a card, and it was not a card that he had usually handed me. Those cards that he usually handed me were "To my loving wife," da 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 da. And this one was, I don't know, it just had like little comical things, like little bears on it or whatnot. It was not that heavy, emotional, "I love you" that I was expecting. And he handed me a bank envelope that had $1,000 in it, which was a lot of money. But it spoke to me that there was no thought, that everything about me had become an afterthought. And I remembered that drive out to Long Island that day with the baby in the back, but he was very cold and detached from me. We wound up going to my parents' house, and it was a beautiful day. It was August, and it was a warm day, and there was swimming, and my sisters and my nieces and nephew with everybody was there. And Dave was there, and he was participating. But I remember my father said to me, "He's spending a lot of time on the phone. Is everything okay?" I said, he has been working. So I'm sure he's just doing a deal, probably somewhere in North America, or maybe now even in the South American deals. He's all over the place, Dad. And it got to be a little bit late, and I was getting ready. We were staying over, and I was getting ready to put Mikey to bed. So I remember walking upstairs to the room that I had grown up in, and there was a rocking chair. The rocking chair that my mother had used to rock me in. And it was in the bedroom that I grew up in as a little girl. And I sat there rocking. And all of a sudden I hear something, I hear a voice. I hear a voice on the side lawn of my parents' house. So I got up and I walked to the other side of the pack and play. So I was right at the window. And I lean out at the window and I'm listening. It's Dave's voice. Who is he talking to? Who is he laughing with? I started to listen more closely. And all of a sudden, it struck me. Now, it's like a red flare. And I remember running down the stairs. I flung open the door and I ran, infuriated to where he was. And he looked at me and he had the phone in his hand and he threw it. And I said, "Who are you talking to?" And he said, "My mother." I said, "Why would you have thrown the phone if it were your mother? You're not that one man standing apart from the others. You're having an affair." He denied it for a few moments, but I was pretty insistent. And then finally he looked at me and he said, "I am." I had a rage that came over me. And I remember just pounding and pounding on him. A few moments later, I felt hands, strong hands, pulling my wrists back, pulling from behind me, pulling me off him. Those were my father's hands. Because in that moment where I lost a husband, he lost a son. I told him to leave my parents' home, and he drove back to our home in New Jersey by himself. That was the last time that we ever spent even a morning together as husband and wife. Everything that I knew to be true in my life was false. He actually had set up a place to live with this woman and had a separate life there. So much of the time that I thought he was traveling wasn't all over North America or South America. It was to the next town over. I was angry at David. I was angry at Teresa, the woman that stepped quite comfortably into my role. And I was angry even at God, because I felt I had done everything right, in the right order, at the right schools, tried to be my best as a good citizen. Why, God? Why is my life in shambles? Why can't the one person that I picked out of billions of men on the earth, the one that I chose to be my husband, is the one that doesn't want anything to do with me? And this began a very sad, dark time in my life, because I rejected God. my anger did not diminish as time went on. Of and by myself, my anger did not cease. Unforgiveness is like a poisonous rattlesnake that lives inside of you. We tend to hold on to unforgiveness inside of us. And you know what it does? It corrodes. But what did happen was, like a poisonous adder living inside of me, that poison of unforgiveness corroded who God wanted me to be. And I became a very angry, uncaring, unkind, very spiteful, very vengeful person. Such a burden, such a weight to walk around and be so resentful and to be so angry. It really is something that totally keeps us from developing a relationship with God. I think back on my life and during this period when I would do things born out of my resentment that I'm embarrassed about today. I had made a commitment to my child when this first happened that he would never know my wrath toward his father or towards his stepmother. I was intent upon that. And because of that, he spent a lot of time with his half-brothers. I never wanted him to feel like the other. And I have to say that he was always treated exactly the same way as they. That was a blessing indeed, that he was able to grow up with his brothers that way. All those years where Dave would pick Mikey up on the weekends, if she were in the car, I would tell him, don't let that car face our home. I don't want to look out and see her. I had been a victim, but then I started living that, you know? I was the one that suffered. I was the one who had been cuckolded. And then one day, there was no way for my ex-husband to come pick Michael up. He was traveling, he was away. So the only way that Michael would get to see his brothers and his dad on this particular weekend was if she and I made the connection. I had avoided this for 8 years. I was not ready for it. I remember practicing it though, practicing my face in like the bathroom mirror, what I would say, what my indignation would look like, how would I hold my head and my eyes, and how absolutely disgusted I was looking at her. Didn't want to know what was going to happen next, and I saw her. And she was exquisitely beautiful. A beautiful young woman. And as I looked at her, it was not at all the kind of arrogance I expected. Her eyes were rimmed and red, as if she had been crying or thinking about it. And I remember my son met up with his brothers. She and I exchanged a pleasantry or two. I was on my best behavior. And then she looked right at me. I was not expecting this. And her eyes became filled with water, like mine are now. She said, I don't know if I will ever be able to forgive myself for what I did to you and your family. But I pray that someday you will forgive me. I don't know what happened to me, but I put my arms out. She fell into my arms crying. And I said, said to her, I forgive you. I forgive you. And in that moment, that rattlesnake that lived in me left. The burden that I had carried for so long, the anger, it was all gone. And I knew that God had done something great for me that I could not and would not have done for myself. What just happened to me? My act of forgiveness could not have come from me. It came from God. That moment between Teresa and me was absolutely life-changing. It really unburdened me from the shackles of unforgiveness that I had carried for both her and for Dave for all those years. Sometimes I think about how much wasted energy that was. You know, and what was funny was that Teresa and I became the closest of friends, because once I put all of that misery and unforgiveness and resentment and anger, once I put that all away, all I could feel was this deep desire to know this woman and to know these boys. And so we truly began spending a lot of time together. And I have to say, Dave was thrilled. He had wanted this reconciliation for many years. I really do believe that God did this for a reason. He showed me this beautiful sense of forgiveness so that A, I would talk about it forever, but B, because he had something else in mind for me to do, that he was going to use me. And he couldn't use me if my heart was hardened, you know. So I got very involved in praying again. I felt called to prayer, and the prayer that I was called to pray was the Holy Rosary. And I always believe that because I was called to the Rosary, I developed a deep Marian spirituality to Jesus through Mary. Mary came to get me. She saw that my heart was open. She saw that I was now unburdened. And I do believe that it was she that brought me to the foot of the cross with her son. I began coming back to the church, seeking the sacraments. I began eventually an annulment process that allowed me to participate fully. I didn't have any intention of remarrying, but it was interesting because after I had this moment of forgiveness with Teresa and with Dave, God just put a man right in front of me. And I thought, wow, this is something that I need to explore. And so it was at this time that I met the man who would become my second husband. God really does things for us that we can't even think about doing for ourselves. He had allowed my heart to be fully reconciled with a very contrite Dave and a very contrite Teresa, where their children were now my bonus children. And in addition to that, he had put a man in my path that would now become my second husband. A man who would encourage me in my faith journey. A man who would walk with me along this journey as I sought to know God more deeply. People started seeing a change in me. They started seeing a change. I had been so angry and so dour, and now I was filled with love and filled with the Holy Spirit. And people said to me, why don't you come and address a church group here or a church group there and share how you have been healed, a spiritual healing through your Catholic faith. And I was so happy to do that. I wanted to give witness wherever I could. And so I was the toast of every Rosary Society or communion breakfast to share with them something that was so important to me. My healing, my love, not only for my God, but for others, really living those two great commandments that we are called to love our God beyond all other things and to love each other as ourselves. And how to explore how I, as this Catholic woman now, how I could really get close to my faith. We often hear about people who endure a lot of suffering. And they endure that suffering for a purpose, for a reason. And they come out of that suffering with more compassion, with more empathy, with more of an ability to see and appreciate the small things in life. But the suffering that I endured as a person that rejected God, because now to experience His light and His love, it's a blessing that I will be eternally grateful for. And I can see how God prepared my heart so that I could welcome Him in and begin a ministry, changing hearts, opening minds, and even saving lives. God has given me so many graces to be able to walk with individuals, to find empathy and compassion, to connect with those that are suffering from the disease of addiction and their families, so that I could bring about God's love and God's mercy to them. And the thing that changed it all for me, walking in His forgiveness so that I could go out and in His name be a healer for others. We are called to forgive. In Jesus' own words, only when we truly forgive can we open our hearts fully to His love. It is the greatest gift you can give yourself. It is the greatest gift you can give someone else.